You can visit our website anytime you like, rte.ie/Mooney. Now, you don't have to follow the Mars rover mission or wrap your head around the Higgs boson particle to immerse yourself in science. In fact, all you need to do is look right under your nose, open your eyes, and right now, I'd like you to use your ears. Take a listen to this. See if you recognise this sound. Are they slightly awkward coughs or just someone clearing their throat? How about this one? And I'll give you a clue. You'd have to stand on your head drinking water to cure it. Bit trickier, that one. Hiccups. Hiccups. Here's something you may have heard around you this lunchtime. Excuse you. Okay, something a bit more acceptable and enjoyable. Those sounds, those simple bodily functions we take for granted, are actually an open invitation to study how the brain works and what makes us human. What's more, they hold clues to our evolutionary origins. Robert Provine is a neuroscientist at the University of Maryland, and he's author of a new book, Curious Behaviour, Yawning, Laughing, Hiccupping and Beyond. Robert, good afternoon to you. Can you tell me what deeper meaning can these routine behaviours hold?
Well, by telling some of our species untold tales, we're not only learning something about the neurological programming of these actions, but we're getting a new scientific approach to human behavior. Just as molecular biology has given us some leverage on some difficult and otherwise impossible tasks in understanding the processes of life, by looking at some of these molecular actions of behavior, such as yawning, sneezing, crying, hiccuping, and so on, we can give some insights into the neurological basis of human behavior.
How?
For example, when we study yawning, something that we always do, we're learning something about the productions and control of the yawn, but we're also learning something about its contagion. By looking at its contagion, we're learning about the neurological programming of social behavior in a way that social scientists have never appreciated. When you see another person yawn, you don't think, I want to do what that person over there just did. When you hear a person laugh, and you laugh contagiously, you don't think, oh, I want to laugh too. You just do it. So when we look at these contagious actions like yawning and sneezing and coughing, we are looking at the neurological underpinnings of a social action.
So what is it telling you? Because now that you mention it, I think I have yawned when I've seen other people yawn in the past.
Yes, but you don't decide to do it.
No.
So in yawning and laughing, it's something we do in response to what the other person does, but it does not involve conscious control. We humans vastly overrate the conscious, rational nature of everyday life and forget that we're very often beasts of the herd. So yawning, laughing, crying, coughing people are herd animals.
Robert, yes, that's very interesting. Now, what possible function could the contagion of yawning serve?
Well, by yawning, we're looking at a very ancient act. For example, most animals with backbones yawn. Only a few animals yawn contagiously. So by looking at contagious yawning, we're looking at the neurological basis of human social behavior. This provides a much-needed path to looking at the biological basis of social behavior, something that social scientists have neglected. When you yawn when other people yawn, it's tying together not only our behavior, but it's tying together the underlying physiology. Now, for example, I believe that yawning people, you're basically stirring up your physiology. But when you yawn when another person yawns at bedtime, I believe that we're preparing ourselves for sleep. Just as yawning when you wake is stirring up our physiology and providing us for wakefulness. But until we work out the details of what the biological function of yawning is, I suspect it has several. Now, we can use yawning as a device to look at other things. For example, do autistic individuals or schizophrenic individuals lack the ability to yawn contagiously, or do they yawn in some unusual way? So people having abnormal social behavior may be deficient or different in their ability to provide these contagious actions.
Are you saying that prior to language, spoken language, there is a kind of language of body language of yawning, laughing, crying, whatever, which communicates at a level which doesn't require the other guy to have the same vocabulary or syntax as you have. So it functions independently of modern language. It's a kind of a basic way of communicating between people. Is this a thesis you're offering?
Yes, that's true. Laughing, for example, starts to appear between 3 and 4 months after birth. It's one of the first means that a mother has of communicating with a baby, long before you have the emergence of speech. And when we laugh together with other people, again, we have an unconscious act. When you ask people to laugh, most people say, well, I can't laugh just because you asked me to do it. That's a very important observation. So our lives are filled with laughter, but we don't consciously speak ha-ha as we would choose a word in speech. Also, we laugh along when we hear other people laughing. One of the reasons why there's laugh tracks in television situation comedies, that when we hear other people laughing, it will increase the likelihood that we consider something funny or that we will laugh in turn. We find that most laughter is not a consequence of humor. If you listen to what's said before people laugh, it's things like, well, I've got to go now. What are you doing today, Derek? Things like that. It's not jokes. We find that males are the best laugh getters. We find that the essential ingredient for laughter is not humor, but it's another person. When you're alone, and this includes being away from vicarious sources of social stimulation like the radio, the television, reading a book, laughter disappears when we're alone. So we can say laughter is primarily about relationships, only incidentally about humor, which is a modern philosophical, linguistic, and cognitive contrivance to get other people to laugh.
Talk to me about hiccups.
Hiccups is a tough one, in that the cause of hiccups is unknown. It seems like most of what we know about hiccups are various efforts to get them to stop. But when you look at hiccups as a scientific problem, you come across some interesting findings. Hiccuping is one of the most prevalent prenatal behaviors. Hiccuping is more frequent in early embryonic life than is breathing. Throughout life, we start to hiccup less. One of the surprises about hiccuping is that it has a curious resurgence in elderly male thoracic surgery patients, where it becomes an impediment to healing and certainly at least causes sleep loss. So hiccuping is a curious behavior of the ones that I talk about in the book: yawning, laughing, crying, tearing, redness of the eyes, coughing, sneezing, vomiting and nausea, tickling, itching, scratching, farting, belching, prenatal behavior, and so on. It's one of the ones about which we know the least. You know, it simply may be a residue of something that played an important role in prenatal development, or simply a glitch in a neurobehavioral systems that has no function.
Do you not think it has something to do with digestion or indigestion?
Clearly, those things can be a cause. So we can talk about hiccups as a symptom. If you eat hot peppers, that will trigger hiccuping. But that's very different than saying that hiccuping helps us to deal with eating a hot pepper. One of the most curious actions that we examined was farting. And this allowed us to introduce the age-old question I'm sure we've all pondered: why do we speak through the mouth instead of the butt? Because after all, the orifice through which I'm speaking right now involves the use of a valve that evolved to keep water and food out of the airways when I swallow. So it's a kind of evolutionary happenstance that we speak through the mouth. But we could ask the question, why not speak through the butt, using the rectum as the bellows and the anus as the vibrating membrane? At the very least, pondering this important issue has a certain memorable educational value.
Robert, I believe fish do that, or some species of fish communicate orally through farting, which is a very interesting development. The picture you paint is one of a two-tier person. One, the conscious level, we go around doing things and thinking we're doing things for very good reasons. And then we have within us this little demon that does all kinds of things off his own bat, which causes us to laugh. For instance, decides that something is very funny and we laugh. We could never do that consciously. It's not possible. Now, this little demon, it seems to me, is often very works against us a lot of the time. There was a film last year called The King's Speech. It was about George VI, who had a terrible problem, a stammering problem. Now, that stammering, blushing, or impotence, for instance, in men, that would seem to be a kind of an irrational response to things coming from this evil demon side of us, which works against us. I mean, if I want to impress some lady and I go over and I'm very pretending to be very debonair and with it, then suddenly I blush and I'm exposed and my campaign collapses completely. So the little evil demon is working against me. This sort of thing you postulate in there seems to be a bit of an enemy of us.
I wouldn't call it an evil demon. I would simply say it's a basic fact of our being. For example, laughing did not evolve into speech. It involves a different kind of mechanism. Anyone can say ha-ha. If you ask someone, can you say ha-ha? They'll immediately say ha-ha. If you ask someone to laugh, most people can't do so or produce a pure imitation of laughter. So conscious speech and laughing are very different mechanisms. Also, if you examine when people laugh during conversation, they typically laugh at phrase breaks. A person may say, "I've got to go now." They won't say, "I've got to go now." So what we find is behavioral evidence of the dominance of speech over its ancient competitor, laughing. So we either are in laugh mode or speech mode. And when we have conversational laughter, it does not disrupt the phrase structure of speech. So we have different mechanisms controlling laughing and talking.
But they're two totally different mechanisms. Real laughter, when I find something funny and I can't control it, I must laugh, is one thing. But when I feign to laugh at the boss's joke told for the umpteenth time at the tea break, I'm just paying homage to the boss, and he knows I'm not really laughing at it anyway. It's a way of showing obedience and respect and bowing the knee and scraping, kowtowing.
Do you do that much, Rich?
Oh, I'm past master of it, Derek. As you can see right now, you're my boss. No, but isn't that a different behaviour? Exactly. That isn't laughing. That is a kind of speech that is based originally on laughing or connect.
You know, there's something I call laugh speak, which is a hybrid of speech and laughter. You know, for example, if you pose a sensitive issue, for example, if in interviewing someone on the air, you're saying, you know, was that news story really true about your wife having an affair? Something like that, the laughter may be provided as a way of diffusing a sensitive topic. But that kind of laugh speak, that hybrid behavior, I believe, is a different action than your hearty ha-ha laugh that would otherwise be produced. So laughing can be a paralinguistic signal, just as yawning can. For example, if someone was doing something that you found boring, you could feign a yawn. But a feigned yawn is not a real yawn because we can't yawn on command.
Robert, I read some research by a German psychologist. Work he had done, I think it was Dr. Tietz, and it said he compared the amount of time that people laughed back in the 1960s to today, and he came up with some figure that said something like that people spent 18 minutes per day laughing in the 1960s, and now we're only spending something like 6 minutes per day laughing. So we're laughing less as a society.
How do you even know that, Terry?
Well, I've read the report.
You go with everybody who laughed ever in the world in the 1960s.
An average.
And did you laugh for 18 minutes a day?
On average, yes.
No, I just don't believe that.
Well,
I'm sorry.
That's but what I was going to ask you was, are we laughing less as a society, and why are we laughing less?
Well, laughter is literally the sound of play. So the human ha-ha evolved from the labored breathing of rough and tumble play, whereby the primate sounds like a panting dog. That's how chimpanzees laugh. That has evolved into the human ha-ha. The ha-ha of human laughter, modern human laughter, is literally the sound of rough-and-tumble play. So since laughing is a sound of play, whether it's physical play or what we adults engage in more conversational play, it's nevertheless play. So if there's more play, there's more laughing. But we can generalize that laughter is a sound of play, and children play more than adults. But if you want more laughter in your life, play more. And since laughter is a social action, remember it's more about relationships than humor. If you want to laugh more, spend more time with friends, family, lovers. If you're sitting by yourself in a room, even if you're watching comedy material, you're not going to laugh much.
Talk to me about sidewalk neuroscience, please.
Okay, well, one of my motives in studying the curious behavior of my book is to tell some of our species' untold tales, things that we've all been interested in throughout our lives. And after all, since we've been doing it all of our life, we have certain expertise. But I'm also interested in using these ancient instinctive acts as tools to look at otherwise difficult neurobehavioral problems. Just as molecular biology has provided important tools for understanding complicated processes of life, we can use yawning, laughing, crying, and so on as a means, a tool of looking at complicated behavior. By looking at yawning, we learn both about how yawning is produced and controlled, but we also learn about the neurological mechanism of social behavior. And one of the nice things about looking at these actions is that it's an example of what I call small science, the kind of science that we can all do, the kind of science that, unlike the super collider or the Mars rover, does not require multi-billion-dollar budgets. Even school children can look at these things. So the small science of these curious behaviors requires essentially no budget, and anyone can do. So instead of the typical approaches to science, whereby expensive technological breakthroughs provide new discoveries, in these behaviors we find sort of the frontiers of research near at hand, not because they're trivial, but because we neglect the commonplace. I also refer to this approach as sidewalk neuroscience, important insights into brain and behavior that can be observed in everyday life. So again, instead of resorting to expensive technological innovations, simply through clever, low-budget approaches, we can look at processes that are near at hand.
So you said anybody can do it. Can you give me a suggestion?
Now, for example, yawning. By looking at yawning, you can say, do bored people really yawn? The answer is yes. Do sleepy people yawn, for example, before bedtime at night? The answer is yes. But a surprise is that the time in which you actually yawn most is upon waking in the morning. In regard to yawning, is yawning contagious? Overwhelmingly so. Simply talking about yawning as we're doing now would be a trigger for yawns. And so that means that the sensory trigger for yawns is not seeing a person yawn. It's sufficient to simply read about it, to talk about it, to hear people talking about it on the radio. If we're going to say yawn, seeing someone yawn, works, what part of the yawning face is the most important trigger? Here, a surprise is the gaping mouth, the most obvious feature, is not critical. The gaping mouth of a yawning person is not an effective yawn stimulus. But if you have a face in which the yawning mouth is edited out, it's just as effective a yawn stimulus as the intact face. So we find the overall gestalt, the overall pattern of the yawning face is key, as is the tilting back of the head, the hunching of the shoulder, the squinting of the eyes. The gaping mouth is not really critical. If we test the age-old hypothesis that yawning is a response to a shortage of oxygen or building up of carbon dioxide, in our lab we've shown that one is not true. If you give people enhanced levels of carbon dioxide, they don't yawn more. If you give them 100% oxygen, they don't yawn less. Thus, you can learn a lot about the production and control of yawning.
Well, Robert, I can say when I was a young lad going to school many, many years ago, we used to go on the bus and we used to do that actual experiment. And in the old buses, older listeners would remember, at the back of the bus there were seats that faced each other. And myself and a buddy of mine, we used to sit down there in the mornings. We used to look at the people opposite us and we used to yawn. And we'd wait and see and count how long it would take for them to yawn back.
But does it have to be a real yawn in order for it to be contagious?
That's what I'm saying. It doesn't have to be, because we would yawn. It wasn't a real yawn.
Well, go on and yawn now and see if you can make me yawn.
Well, simply saying that you were talking about, you're dealing with yawning as a yawn stimulus. For example, you're triggering everyone in your audience that's hearing us discuss this. You're triggering yawns in them. And that's one of the complications of studying yawning.
Derek
is that it's so contagious, anything that has to do with it will trigger it.
Whatever about talking about yawning made people yawning. Certainly talking about farting makes me want to laugh. I can tell you that. Anyway, Robert, thank you very much indeed. Very nice to talk to you today. That's Robert Provine, who is the author of Curious Behaviour, Yawning, Laughing, Hiccupping and Beyond. It's just been published, and you can find details about that book on our website, rte.ie/Mooney.